Houston on 2, got a question about Starliner.
Houston's with you, Butch. Go ahead.
There's a strange noise coming through the speaker, and I didn't know if you could connect into the Starliner and let me keep my let you hear. I don't know what's making it, but I don't.
From 3, 2, 1, and liftoff. Liftoff of the 25th Space Shuttle mission, and it has cleared the tower.
We have a report from the flight dynamics officer that the vehicle has exploded. Flight director confirms that. We are looking.
You see concern etched on their faces, the breath that they've been holding released, and then the realization sets in that something is wrong.
Every image is a new discovery, and each will give humanity a view of the universe that we've never seen before.
This telescope is one of humanity's great engineering achievements.
From rogue planets emitting strange radio signals to ancient star clusters that could rewrite the history of our universe, these are some of the most incredible discoveries made by the James Webb Telescope. Did the James Webb Telescope spot an unnatural object out in space? Well, just back in September of this year, there was this wave of excitement online as a rumor spread that the James Webb Telescope had spotted a large moving object about 10 light years away from Earth, possibly an alien spaceship. Now, according to various posts, this mysterious object exhibited an unnatural change in trajectory, leading many to wonder if this was some sort of alien craft or a piece of technology. There were also claims that members of Congress were being briefed about this discovery by the National Security Agency and the US Department of Defense. The details of this briefing were said to be kept under wraps from the public, of course. As this story started circulating, UFO enthusiasts joined the conversation. On September 21st, US Rep. Andre Carson, who had previously led a congressional hearing on unidentified aerial phenomena, was asked about the JWST briefing, but he had no comment, which of course just got people even more curious than before. NASA hasn't released any information about detecting this mysterious object, but could they be covering something up to avoid mass panic? There's also been some recent talk about the James Webb Space Telescope finding signs of life on a distant planet called K218b. But scientists at the University of California, Riverside say the excitement might be a little premature. While we all want to find hard evidence of alien life on a distant planet, at least most of us anyway, it looks like we might have to hold our breaths a little longer. That doesn't mean there isn't interesting news to talk about though. K218b is pretty cool. It's about 120 light years away, a super Earth with 8 times the mass of our planet, and it sits in its star's habitable zone. This means it might have water, and where there's water, there very well could be life. The planet also has temperatures that are very similar to Earth's, so that's another good sign. The James Webb also spotted some interesting stuff in its atmosphere, like carbon dioxide and methane. One of the biggest finds was something called dimethyl sulfide, or DMS, which is made by tiny ocean plants. The fact that DMS has been detected in the atmosphere means there could very well be life producing it. Scientists are continuing to observe the planet with different tools on the James Webb to get a clearer picture. They believe that if life does exist there, it might show up in ways we don't see here on Earth. So even though this isn't exactly the news and breakthrough we were hoping for, it's still a step in the right direction in our never-ending search for life beyond our planet. The James Webb Telescope spotted distant galaxies that aren't supposed to be there. Well, that sounds ominous. These galaxies, visible as tiny reddish dots in the deep field images, are packed with mature red stars and appear to be from a time just 500 to 700 million years after the Big Bang. Typically, astronomers expected to find young, small galaxies from the universe's infancy, formed shortly after the so-called Dark Ages, when the universe was filled with a thick fog of hydrogen. imagine. Instead, JWST's observations showed galaxies that are not just large, but also much older than anticipated. We had specific expectations for the type of galaxies that live in the early universe. They are young and small, said Joel Leja, an assistant professor at Penn State. What's shocking is that some of these galaxies are estimated to be 50 times more massive than previously thought, possibly rivaling the mass of our Milky Way when the universe was only 3% of its current age. This discovery could change everything scientists thought they knew about how galaxies form. A black hole blowtorch. That also sounds pretty ominous. This story just came out under a month ago. Astronomers have spotted a gigantic blowtorch-like jet shooting out from a supermassive black hole, which is causing nearby stars to explode. So, space is terrifying. The massive jet, stretching 3,000 light years, comes from a black hole 6.5 billion times the mass of our sun. The energy beam is so powerful that just being near it can be catastrophic for cosmic objects. Again, researchers have observed an increase in star systems exploding. We don't know what's going on, but it's just a very exciting finding, said study leader author Alec Lessing from Stanford University. He also said that the discovery points to gaps in our understanding of how black hole jets interact with their surroundings. Typically, supermassive black holes pull in matter, heating it up to emit light billions of times brighter than any star. They can also launch enormous jets of energy that extend throughout galaxies. While astronomers understand that these jets shape galaxy evolution, the specific effects on nearby star systems are mostly unknown. The James Webb Telescope has recently spotted jets of ancient gas shooting out from a distant comet-like object called a centaur. These findings are helping scientists understand how these centaurs formed, what they're made of, and how they eventually form into full-fledged comets. Plus, these centaurs can actually tell us a lot about the formation of the solar system. Centaurs are usually found in the icy Kuiper belt beyond Neptune, but gravitational nudges from Neptune or close encounters with stars can push some of them closer to the sun. There are over 500 known centaurs, but experts think there could be as many as 10 million out there. Sarah Faggy, a postdoctoral researcher at NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center, states, centaurs can be considered as some of the leftovers of our planetary system's formation. Because they're kept at very low temperatures, they hold onto important information about the early solar system, end quote. One centaur is called 29P Schwarzmann-Watchman 1, which spews out gas every 6 to 8 weeks, which I wish was the frequency for me. Nothing like not being able to lift your bed sheets without passing out from the horrific Dutch oven you've been forming all night. Anyway, for a space rock, it's spewing out gas pretty frequently though. The James Webb's near-infrared spectrograph revealed tons of carbon monoxide jets being shot out of it. What's causing these jets is still a mystery. Normally, comets produce jets when the sun heats water ice, causing it to vaporize, but researchers found no water vapor in 29P's jets because it's just too far away from the sun for that. Sarah Faggy's team suspected that 29P might not be a single object, but rather a collection of smaller pieces stuck together called contact binaries. Geronimo Villanueva from NASA said the fact that Centaur 29P has such dramatic differences in the abundance of CO and CO2 across its surface suggests that 29P may be made of several pieces. These centaurs, along with asteroids and comets, are ancient remnants from the solar system's formation, which means they hold clues about the early days of its formation. The next step is to keep observing 29P to see if the jets change, which could give more insights into its behavior and structure.
In our number 10 spot today, we have Claude Maurice Marcel Vorilhon, or Rael. Rael is a French journalist who is also the founder of what is called the Raelian movement, which is a UFO cult. Apparently, Rael had some sort of extraterrestrial encounter in December of 1973, and this is what led him to found this movement. Rael says that during his alien encounter, the alien told him that he was the chosen one, and he needed to spread the message to the people on Earth. This UFO cult believes that humans were created by an alien species, and once we find a way to find peace on Earth, those aliens will will come down and tell us our true origins and bring us to utopia. In our number 9 spot today, we have Marshall Applewhite. Marshall and his former partner, Bonnie Nettles, were responsible for founding the cult called Heaven's Gate. If you haven't heard of it before, these two believed themselves to be something called walk-ins, which they said are higher beings who took control over the bodies of two middle-aged human bodies so as to spread their word and teach humanity. Crazy thing is, there are people who believed it, unfortunately, because they were manipulated and taken advantage of. They gave up their lives and all worldly possessions in the belief that Earth was to be recycled, and the only way to continue surviving would be to leave immediately. The time to leave Earth came in March of 1997 when Marshall claimed that they had a spacecraft that was traveling to the comet Hale-Bopp. The catch with this spacecraft, however? Well, Marshall told them that they all needed to stage taking their own lives in order for the UFO to take them to, quote, another level of existence above humans. 39 members of the cult, including Marshall himself, took their lives over the course of a few days. This is the largest event of its kind, next to the Jonestown Massacre. In our number 8 spot today, we have Ernest Norman. Ernest and his wife Ruth are credited with being the founders of what is called Unarius, which is an acronym for Universal Articulate Interdimensional Understanding of Science. This group believes in immortality of the soul and that all beings have been reincarnated many, many times. They also believe that in the past, the solar system was the home to an ancient interplanetary civilization, and that aliens are human beings who have lived on Earth as well as other planets, even those outside of our solar system. These aliens are said to be advanced, intelligent beings that exist on higher frequency planes. These aliens are more advanced than humans both spiritually as well as scientifically. The group is definitely best known for their predictions of UFOs landing on Earth, but they are also known for their, quote, spiritual teachings. In our number 7 spot today, we have L. Ron Hubbard. Scientology is a set of beliefs and practices that were invented by L. Ron Hubbard, and it has been variously defined as a cult. The core belief of this group is that humans are immortal and that our bodies are essentially just a shell to house us. Prior to landing in our human shells, however, this cult believes that our souls belonged to other extraterrestrial lives and that this life here on Earth is just one of many. Of course, that part in the text is only released to you once you spend $200,000 on the cult. This group is quite controversial, not only for the beliefs of the group, but because of their illegal activities that also occur, like fraud or spying on the government. There have been numerous Superior Court judgments that have not only called this group a dangerous cult, but also a manipulative profit-making business as well. In our number 6 spot today, we have Vinny O. Vinny is a person who thankfully doesn't run a terrifying cult, and is rather a person who is aspiring to be an alien. Vinny has spent thousands and thousands of dollars on cosmetic procedures in order to achieve this alien look, and is even trying to have surgery in order to completely remove their genitals. They want to be completely sexless and even go as far as to remove their nipples and belly button. Vinny explains that when they first moved to Los Angeles, they saw everything around them was about sex and beauty, and they just didn't want to be a part of that world. They wanted to be separate from the crowd and embrace unattractiveness and shun sexual objectification, which is why they chose a genderless alien as their muse.
Now, resources. They're what human beings have been fighting over since the dawn of time. Resources mean life or death, and in space travel, water, food, and oxygen are limited. It's one of the main reasons why prolonged space travel has been so tough to figure out. One of the biggest fears is running out of oxygen. Spacecraft rely on complex life support systems to generate oxygen from water, but any malfunction could lead to a shortage. And the thought of being stranded in the black void of space, slowly running out of air, knowing there's no way help can reach you in time, is pretty terrifying. Astronauts also need water, not just for drinking, also for cooking and hygiene. In space, water has to be carefully recycled from every possible source, including urine and sweat. Yes, sending water up into space is expensive, as is, so astronauts on the ISS are already working with a short supply, so imagine being out deep into space. The fear here is that any failure in the recycling system could deplete the water supply, and then of course we have food. Gotta make sure there's enough food to last the entire journey. Space food is specifically prepared to stay edible for long periods, but if supplies were to somehow run out or become contaminated, they'd be screwed. And again, this is more manageable on the ISS, so close to Earth, but if a manned crew was deep out into space, a resupply would of course take a much longer time to reach them. There have even been situations on the International Space Station where there have been delays that have happened with supplies of food and water. Rockets have been sent up from Earth, but stuff's gone wrong and supplies have been delayed getting there. It can be a real issue. All right, in shows like Star Trek, it always seems like space is just this empty void you could just fly through no problem until you come in contact with another ship or a planet, but things wouldn't be quite as smooth sailing in real life. Space is full of debris. You have micrometeoroids, for example, which are tiny particles of rock or metal that travel through space at extremely high speeds, and even though they're small, they can cause serious damage if they collide with a spacecraft or spacesuit. Imagine traveling millions of miles from Earth, knowing that at any moment a tiny invisible particle could just puncture the hull of your ship. Even closer to Earth, we have leftover pieces of old satellites and discarded rocket parts and stuff. Most of it is still orbiting around Earth, and there have been situations where stuff has crashed into the International Space Station. Unlike larger objects that can be tracked and avoided, smaller threats are harder to detect and can hit without warning. And forget the ship, what if a spacesuit is punctured during a spacewalk? NASA does use shielding to help protect against debris, but it's impossible to eliminate the risk altogether. One of the biggest dangers to human health is extreme temperatures, and space can be extremely cold or intensely hot, with no atmosphere to moderate the temperature. Objects in space can experience temperatures from hundreds of degrees below zero to hundreds of degrees above, depending on their exposure to the sun. In deep space, when an object is in direct sunlight, it can get incredibly hot, but in the shadow of a planet or when the sun is blocked, temperatures can plummet. And this drastic difference in temperature can happen really quickly, which can be a big problem for both astronauts and their equipment. For astronauts, it's spacewalks where this can be the most dangerous. Spacesuits are designed to protect against fluctuations in temperature, but any malfunction or damage to the suit and you could suffer from hyperthermia or hypothermia. And for the spacecraft, well, temperature changes cause things to expand and contract. So if we did happen to be on a massive journey deep into space, who knows what the constant expansion and contraction would do to the ship over time. Another concern is gravitational anomalies, regions of space with unexpected gravitational forces that could trap a spacecraft in a dangerous zone. Space is unpredictable. The idea of encountering regions where the gravitational pull is stronger or weaker than anticipated is a real concern. This could cause the ship to veer off course, or worse, it could get caught in a gravitational trap, almost like a whirlpool, like just stuck in orbit, leaving everyone stranded, floating in orbit until all the food and water runs out. Very scary thought. Another dangerous aspect of space travel is the exposure to harmful radiation. Not sure if you're aware of this, but human beings aren't really built for flying through space. We, as well as everything else on this planet, is perfectly suited for Earth. The atmosphere and magnetic field protect us from harmful cosmic and solar radiation, but in space, there is no protection. Astronauts are constantly bombarded by high energy particles, and radiation exposure can cause immediate and long-term health issues. There's a chance of radiation sickness, which causes nausea, vomiting, and fatigue, which sucks on its own, but it can also impair an astronaut's ability to perform tasks. And in space, where one wrong move can spell disaster, that's a bit of a problem. Long-term exposure is even more concerning. Over time, radiation can damage DNA, increasing the risk of cancers or even genetic mutations. The possibility of developing cancer years after a mission is a risk astronauts decide to take on. It's not just an astronaut's health radiation can affect, though, but their equipment as well. Radiation can interfere with the electronics on a spacecraft, causing malfunctions. This would be especially dangerous in deep space, where help would be far away and repairs would have to be made with whatever resources the crew would have on hand. Malfunction in navigation, communication, or, heaven forbid, life support systems would be catastrophic. Now, NASA spacecrafts are designed with shielding to protect against radiation and limit the time astronauts spend in space to reduce exposure, but No matter how much we prepare, the dangers of radiation in deep space are always a threat because things won't always go as planned, and solar flares could make things even worse. Sudden bursts of radiation from the sun can be difficult to predict. Sleep is just as essential to us as food and water, and sleep can be a bit of a problem in space. We've evolved here on Earth with a day and night cycle. It's built into our bodies to be awake during the day and asleep at night, and when that sleep cycle gets messed up, we get messed up. If you've ever spent all day at school and then worked all through the night, you know how detrimental it is to your physical and mental health over time, and it really doesn't take that long. In space, where there's no natural day and night cycle, astronauts can struggle to keep up with a healthy sleep pattern. I mean, the lights are always on, and there's no real sense of time passing, not to mention they sleep upright. The disruption to the body's internal clock can lead to insomnia, fatigue, irritability, or worse. And on top of that, you have the other effects of space travel, like muscle atrophy, and poor sleep can just make this even worse. Then your immune system is weakened, making you more susceptible to illness. So yeah, long duration missions are a big risk. An obvious danger of exploring the far reaches of space is, of course, encountering other life forms. It would be cool, or at least it could be. It could also be an absolute worst case scenario. With billions of galaxies and potentially trillions of planets, the possibility of encountering extraterrestrial life, whether intelligent or not, is a fun idea. But what could these life forms be like? How might they interact with us? We often picture highly advanced and intelligent aliens bent on world domination, like in War of the Worlds, but the motivations of a potential extraterrestrial species are completely unknown. Even unintelligent life forms could be dangerous. Maybe they'd be hostile in a wild animal kind of way. And even if they weren't, another concern is the potential for biological contamination, beings that carry viruses or illnesses that we have no way of dealing with. If astronauts came in contact with alien microbes or organisms, there is a risk that these life forms could, hitch a ride with us back to Earth and then cause even more problems. Being millions or even billions of miles away from Earth means complete isolation, aside from the other astronauts on your crew. Isolation and the psychological impact of it has to be one of the most daunting things about deep space travel. Not only is there no immediate help for emergencies, but the extreme isolation can take a pretty heavy toll on an astronaut's mental health. I mean, this is already something that's known to happen. And if we were to start traveling deeper and deeper into the abyss, this would become an even bigger issue. To be confined in a small spacecraft for months or even potentially years with only a few other people for company, the sense of loneliness can be overwhelming. Communication with Earth would be delayed and limited, and the monotony of space travel would also just be mentally exhausting. Seeing the same small group of idiots in the same environment well, they're not idiots, they're astronauts for God's sakes, but you start to feel like they're idiots, I imagine, after a while. Everyone gets on your nerves eventually. And, no option to step outside for a breath of fresh air, or just to change the scenery. It's just black, and then stars, and then gotta be incredibly claustrophobic. Now, astronauts know what they're getting into, and they train for this, of course, but can any amount of training really prepare you for potentially spending years out there? The fear of the unknown is one of humanity's greatest fears, and we know basically nothing about what is truly out there in the far reaches of space. Look at how many ships have met tragic ends exploring the ocean. The dangerous storms, the wildlife, the treacherous currents. Who the hell knows what horrors are out in space? We can predict some of the dangers we could face in space, like on this list, but there is still stuff that's unexplained. The bursts of energy, anomalies in space-time, unidentified objects of some kind. Stuff we just can't fully explain or even comprehend. Stuff we can never prepare for before we come face to face with it. And unfortunately, the first ones to find out likely won't make it home to tell the tale.
In our number 5 spot today, we have Dorothy Martin. The Seekers, also called the Brotherhood of the Seven Rays, were a group who were a part of a UFO religion that existed in the Midwestern United States in the mid-20th century. This group was originally organized by a man named Charles Laffhead, but was led by Dorothy Martin, who was often referred to as Sister Thedra. She believed that a UFO was coming to save them all from a catastrophe on December 21st, 1954, and this cult is often thought to be one of the earliest UFO religions. Of course, the UFO did not come, and while this made some members quite skeptical, others began to believe that they just had to wait a few more days until Christmas Eve rolled around. When the second incident was a failure as well, this caused many people in the group to begin turning their backs to this religion, which is likely one of the reasons the group and its beliefs dissipated. In our number 4 spot today, we have Philip K. Dick. Philip is certainly best known for his science fiction writings, as he is the author of 44 novels and 121 short stories, but his stories might have been influenced by what was going on in his own personal life. Fellow writer Brad Steger discussed how Philip had written to him in the late 70s to say that he thought he might be what is referred to as a star person. The idea of star people goes back long before our New Age ideas, and it is actually often attributed to a belief that comes from Indigenous Americans, but of course this idea has been taken and modified to fit into our modern world. The idea is essentially that star people are these sort of alien-human hybrids, and this modern version of it was introduced by Brad Steger. He suggests that certain people originated as extraterrestrials and they arrived on Earth either through birth or as a quote-unquote walk-in to an existing human body. As I mentioned before, Philip wrote Brad suggesting that he believed he may be one of these people, which just might explain the varied philosophical and social questions that can be seen in his writings. In our number 3 spot today, we have George Van Tassel. George is a man who, in 1947, moved to Giant Rock near Landers in the Mojave Desert in California, and this is where he established a UFO center. Basically, he was a founding member of a UFO religion, and he was interested in collecting and analyzing UFO phenomena and interviewing people who had claimed to be contacted. In 1952, George began claiming that he received a message via telepathic communication, and that these messages were coming from an extraterrestrial called Ashtar. And not only this, but he also claimed to receive messages from people who had passed, such as Nikola Tesla, famous alien himself. George would also interpret the Christian Bible as a sort of alien intervention in the evolution of humans, and by this I mean he claimed that Jesus himself was an extraterrestrial. To receive these messages, George claimed that he was using a blend of human capabilities as well as the use of an allegedly advanced form of alien technology. Of course, this technology wasn't for everyone, it required the right person with proper training and proper meditation techniques. In our number 2 spot today, we have Maxine Dietrich. In the early 2000s, Maxine created the Joy of Satan Ministries, which is an esoteric occult organization that advocates for, quote, spiritual Satanism. This is basically said to be a combination of theistic Satanism, Gnostic paganism, Western esotericism, UFO conspiracy theories, and extraterrestrial beliefs. A lot going on there. Members believe Satan to be, quote, the true father and creator god of humanity, whose desire was for his creations, humanity, to elevate themselves through knowledge and understanding. Basically, at the core of this belief is the idea that there was some sort of ancient conflict between advanced extraterrestrial races and humans on Earth. They also believe that Satan is an alien, and he was able to create Earth humans from some sort of advanced genetic engineering. Aside from these already out there ideologies, are way more insane and extremely harmful beliefs as well. All in all, this is just one belief system that would probably be best to just stay far, far away from. In our number 1 spot today, we have Heidi Fitko Garth. This is the person who is credited with founding a religious movement that is known as the Atman Foundation. This movement was active mainly on an island in the Canary Islands as well as in Germany. This movement received quite a bit of media attention in 1998 because of a huge scare that occurred. Basically, there were 32 members of this sect that believed they were going to be collected by a spacecraft and taken to a new, unspecified location on another planet. Failing this plan, however, the members were going to take their own lives. This is definitely quite a strange group, and it's unclear if they still exist or not, but hopefully not, considering the spacecraft they were all waiting for likely never came.
Scientists have made an exciting discovery about the exoplanet GJ9827d, located in the constellation Pisces, about 98 light-years from Earth. This is another super-Earth, but this one has been found to have an atmosphere that is saturated with water vapor, with some calling it a steam world, which sounds like a place that would have a lot of mold and fungus and mushrooms, which I guess is all kind of in the same thing, but you know what I mean. Earlier this year, researchers using data from the Hubble Space Telescope confirmed the presence of water in its atmosphere, making GJ9827d the smallest exoplanet known to have an atmosphere, roughly twice the size of Earth. For years, scientists have focused on studying atmospheres of much larger planets. The lead study author on the project noted, "For now, all the planets we've detected that have atmospheres are giant planets, or at best, mini Neptunes. These planets have atmospheres made up of mostly hydrogen, making them more similar to gas giants in the solar system than to terrestrial planets like Earth, which have atmospheres dominated by heavier elements." End quote. Now, what's really cool about this small exoplanet is that its atmosphere is rich in heavier molecules, with a substantial amount of water vapor, so very different from the atmospheres usually seen on larger planets. Now, the surface temperatures on GJ9827d are around 350 degrees Celsius, making it unlikely to support life, but this is still a great step in finding other planets with similar atmospheres to Earth that could be suitable for life. The James Webb recently spotted 6 planets drifting through space, completely unbound from any star's gravity. They're called rogue planets, and these 6 were seen about 960 light-years away, ranging from 5 to 10 times the mass of Jupiter. The reason why scientists are so interested in these rogue planets is because it challenges our understanding of how planets form. Traditionally, planets are thought to develop from leftover gas and dust during star formation, but these new findings suggest that massive planets can also form directly from collapsing gas clouds, similar to the way stars are born. Along with the rogue planets, they also detected brown dwarfs, mysterious objects that are larger than planets but smaller than stars. This isn't the first time the JWST has found free-floating planets either. In 2023, it recorded 42 pairs of gas giants known as Jupiter mass binary objects, or jumbos, in the Orion Nebula. The researchers are still studying the planets to try and find out exactly how they formed. Speaking of Jupiter mass binary objects though, let's talk more about them and the strange radio signals they seem to be giving off. So in 2023, the James Webb Space Telescope identified some rogue planets in the Orion Nebula. Among them, they found a pair of strange entities known as Jupiter mass binary objects, jumbos. Researchers have found that around 80 of these rogue planets exist in pairs, orbiting each other at distances ranging from 25 to 400 times the distance between Earth and the Sun. The nature of jumbos is still a mystery. Scientists aren't sure whether they're true planets or something entirely new. Larger than planets, but smaller than brown dwarfs. Researchers have also detected strange radio signals from one of these jumbo pairs, specifically Jumbo 24. Using archives from the U.S. National Radio Astronomy Observatory, they discovered that Jumbo 24 emitted these steady, powerful radio waves equivalent to the energy release of a quarter of a ton of TNT. The signals are really unusual. Normally, when objects like planets have magnetic fields around them, their signals show a certain pattern called circular polarization, but Jumbo 24's signals don't have this pattern. The radio waves don't match the typical signals we see from known cosmic objects like planets or small stars like brown dwarfs. Researchers even thought about whether the signals could be coming from something behind Jumbo 24, but they think that's unlikely. Scientists are still looking into this, but at this point, Jumbo 24 is a mystery. Back in June, the James Webb Telescope uncovered a pair of baby stars known as binary stars, hidden within a previously identified protostar in the WL20 system about 400 light-years from Earth. Researchers had been observing this system for decades, focusing on a single protostar that was thought to be surrounded by a large disk of gas and dust. But the recent findings show that this disk might actually be made up of two separate disks. The JWST confirmed the existence of these two young stars, each emitting powerful energy jets parallel to one another. Mary Barsney from the SETI Institute said, quote, "What we discovered was absolutely wild. We actually saw that this one star, there's two stars right next to each other. The two stars are estimated to be between 2 million and 4 million years old, which sounds old, but that's just a tiny fraction compared to the sun's 4.6 billion years. These are baby stars. Researchers believe that the remaining material from the disks around these stars could eventually form into exoplanets." The James Webb Telescope also made groundbreaking discoveries after it spotted a series of star clusters that could reshape our understanding of the history of the universe itself. Located in the cosmic gems arc, these clusters are believed to be among the oldest, forming just 460 million years after the Big Bang. The James Webb allowed scientists to identify 5 massive and dense star clusters within this arc. The clusters likely emerged during an intense period of star and galaxy formation. Now, unlike ancient star clusters in our Milky Way, though, which have been around for billions of years, these young clusters are giving them insights into the early stages of star formation and, by extension, helping them understand how the universe may have evolved. From the eerie last recordings of lost Russian cosmonauts to SOS messages and terrifying near-death experiences, these are more terrifying last things astronauts have said in space. What you're about to hear is the supposed sound of a Russian cosmonaut taking some of his last breaths in space. Warning, this audio is pretty unsettling. Now, there's a lot of mystery behind this recording. It was recorded by 2 amateur Italian radio operators named Achille and Giovanni Battista, usually referred to as the Giudica Cordiglia brothers. In the late 50s, they set up a listening station in a disused German bunker near Turin called the Torre Bert. Using improvised equipment, they claimed to have intercepted transmissions from the Soviet Sputnik missions and the first American satellite Explorer 1 in 1958. Throughout the early 60s, the brothers released audio recordings that they alleged were from secret Soviet space missions. Now, we can't really speak to the validity of these recordings, but when most people hear them, they agree that they're pretty eerie. And given the Russian government's tendency for secrecy, especially during the Cold War, it wouldn't really shock me that there were some failed secret space missions that they set out to cover up. For the sake of my life, speak up, you fool. These are said to be some of the last words spoken by Soviet cosmonaut Vladimir Komarov as he plummeted to the ground during the doomed Soyuz 1 mission. Take a listen. That is a real recording of Komarov's last transmission to ground control. Now, as to the exact words he's saying, there is some debate on that. I don't speak Russian, but if anyone in the comments does, let me know what you think he's saying, cause apparently it's really hard to make out. I've heard it sounds like he's speaking a bunch of gibberish even, which, I mean, fair enough. I probably would be too if I were in his situation. Now, if you don't know the circumstances of the Soyuz 1 mission, it was the first crewed flight of the Soyuz spacecraft, launched on April 23, 1967. There were a lot of technical problems from the start, but despite the difficulties, Komarov completed the mission and began his descent back to Earth. But during the landing, the parachute failed to deploy correctly. This caused the descent module to crash into the ground at high speed, killing him on impact. This was the first in-flight death in the history of spaceflight. This is a piece from another radio transmission the Giudica Cordiglia brothers supposedly picked up and recorded, again from a secret Russian space mission. And again, it's hard to make out exactly what the female cosmonaut is saying, even for those who speak Russian, but one possible translation of at least part of the recording is, "Isn't this dangerous? Talk to me. Our transmission begins now. I feel hot. I can see a flame. Am I going to crash? Now, some of these phrases are said to repeat, especially the I feel hot part. Again, if anyone here speaks Russian, let us know if you can make anything out. All I know is that if these recordings are real, these cosmonauts suffered incredibly terrifying deaths. Very brave people. I've got a question about Starliner. There's a strange noise coming through the speaker. I don't know what's making it. This is what astronaut Butch Wilmore told Mission Control at Johnson Space Center in Houston while stationed on the International Space Station. Take a listen.
Houston on 2, got a question about Starliner. There's a strange noise coming through the speaker, and I didn't know if you could connect into the Starliner and let me keep my...
On August 31st, Wilmore heard strange sounds coming from a speaker inside the Starliner spacecraft. He wasn't sure if the noise was due to a connection issue or something else, so he asked the dispatchers in Houston to investigate. He also let ground control listen to what he was hearing. He held his microphone up to the speaker in the Starliner, and this is a piece of the audio. It's definitely creepy. Take a listen.
Can you figure out what's going on? Here we go.
Experts on Earth weren't sure what the noise was at first, but they later figured that the issue was related to a component known as the hardline. While the Starliner was approaching the ISS, it communicated using a radio frequency system. After docking, the crew installed the hardline, which was apparently responsible for transmitting the eerie sounds Wilmore had heard. Up next, we have another recording picked up by our boys, the Judica Cordiglia Bros. This one is apparently a pair of Russian cosmonauts pleading for help. This recording is from May 17th of 1961. Throughout the recording, you can hear the voices of two men and a woman. Again, it's hard to make out what they're saying, but many have translated some of the phrases, which seem to be panicked cries for help. Even without speaking their language, you can hear the desperation in their voices. Now, apparently the recordings end with these chilling last words from the female cosmonaut before the signal is cut off. She says, "Conditions growing worse. Why don't you answer? We are going slower. The world will never know about us." Then silence. Take a listen. It's a creepy recording. You can hear the pain in her voice at one point, as if she's just given up. Now, apparently this transmission was also picked up in Alaska and Sweden. Jerry Lininger was aboard the Mir space station during a dangerous situation that really tested his resolve as an astronaut. He was in the middle of an extended mission when a fire broke out. Now, normally they would have had 3 astronauts, but during crew changes, there could be 6 on board. This meant that sometimes the oxygen supply just wasn't enough, requiring the crew to use a supplemental tank. Things got really bad when the tank of concentrated oxygen caught fire, transforming into what Lininger described as a, quote, huge, unstoppable blowtorch. He recalled, "I was sucking down some dehydrated borscht, and next thing you've got the master alarm blaring." For 14 minutes, Lininger and his crew battled the blaze using fire extinguishers. The flames melted the canister and damaged insulation wiring. Lininger stated, "The flame ate up the chemical, melted the canister, melted insulation, our wires, for example. It was a hot, hot fire burning out of control." While 3 crew members fought the fire, the others prepared a Soyuz spacecraft for a possible emergency escape. But the fire blocked one of the 2 Soyuz ships, leaving only 3 astronauts with a way to escape. Lininger said that would have been a tough decision. Who goes and who stays? Fortunately, they managed to contain the fire though, but then they had to deal with the smoke and this contaminated atmosphere. The crew had to wear oxygen masks while assessing the damage. Lininger also talked about the need to stay focused during situations like this, saying, "You've got to get rid of the distractions, put the fear away, and you sort of realize, if I don't stay calm, I'm dead." So this is a pretty wild story. Son Yeon-yi, the first Korean in space, experienced a terrifying return from the International Space Station in 2008. After a successful mission, she boarded the Russian Soyuz spacecraft to head back to Earth. But things quickly went wrong. Problems with the detachment caused the spacecraft to follow an unsafe trajectory. The onboard computers switched to a ballistic re-entry, a backup method that relies on atmospheric drag to slow down the craft. This resulted in a steep, fast, and hot descent. When they finally landed, Soyun expected to see recovery helicopters and a team ready to assist them. Instead, she said, "When we landed, there was nobody around us." This left the crew in a pretty bad spot. They just spent all this time in zero gravity, and now they had to deal with the overwhelming force of Earth's gravity, and they literally had to crawl out of the craft. But soon, some local Kazakhstani nomadic herders came across them, and they were pretty shocked. They had no knowledge of astronauts or space travel, so it would have been a pretty weird sight. The astronauts asked if they had a cell phone. They didn't. So eventually they went back into the Soyuz to use GPS and a satellite phone to contact the Russian Space Agency. What you've just heard are said to be the dying heartbeats of a Russian cosmonaut. Again, this recording comes to us from the pair of Italian radio operators, and it was recorded in February of 1961. Now, I know this doesn't really count as last words, but an interesting tidbit about this one: the brothers took this recording to a heart surgeon named Dr. A.M. Dogliotti, who apparently told them this is the heart of a dying man. Definitely another unsettling recording. The last transmission picked up by the Giudica Cordiglia brothers is a supposed SOS message. This one was recorded on November 28th of 1960. The message apparently says, "SOS to the entire world." The story goes that it came from a moving space vehicle and was repeated 3 times. Take a listen. A really odd sound, almost sounds like the sound of construction equipment recorded on a potato to me, but apparently other amateur radio operators in Texas and Germany picked up the same message. And another interesting part about this recording is that days after it, Russia did admit that there was a launch which had ended in failure. They just didn't admit that it was a crewed mission. Valentin Bondarenko is a Soviet fighter pilot chosen as a cosmonaut in 1960. On March 23, 1961, he was part of a 15-day endurance test inside a low-pressure altitude chamber in Moscow. The chamber had an atmosphere that was at least 50% oxygen, making it very flammable. On the 10th day of the experiment, after completing his tasks, Bondarenko removed some monitoring sensors from his body. He then used an alcohol-soaked cotton ball to cleanse his skin, and without thinking, he tossed the used cotton aside, and it landed on a hot plate that he'd been using to brew tea. This ignited, and when Bondarenko tried to extinguish the flames with his sleeve, he caught fire almost instantly. The chamber was under pressure, and it took nearly half an hour for a doctor to open the door and reach him, and by that time, Bondarenko had suffered severe burns over most of his body. A surgeon later noted that the only spots where he could find BLOOD vessels for an IV were on the soles of his feet, which were protected by his boots. He died from shock 16 hours after the accident. His last words: "Too much pain. Do something please to kill the pain." The head of the manned orbital flight program blamed the tragedy on poor organization at the institute. For years, the Soviet government kept Bondarenko's death a secret, and it wasn't until 1980 that the details were finally revealed. In honor of his contributions to space exploration, a crater on the moon's far side was named after him. Space exploration pushes the boundaries of human exploration and technology, but unfortunately, not all these missions end in success. From deadly experimental space plane crashes to ill-fated missions that the government tried to cover up, these are the top 10 secret space missions that ended in tragedy. Has there ever been a real, officially documented flying saucer? Well, yes, actually, it's called the Avro car. The Avro car was part of a secretive project in the 50s that aimed to create a flying saucer for the US military. The Avro car was designed by the Canadian company Avro Aircraft and intended to be a vertical takeoff and landing vehicle. The idea was to give the military a high-speed aircraft that could hover and fly low to the ground, ideal for reconnaissance and troop transport. But things didn't work out. The prototype couldn't achieve the speeds or capabilities they were hoping for. I mean, just look at it. Instead of flying like a bird, it barely managed to stay off the ground, and when it did, it was just all wobbly. Its performance was underwhelming, to say the least. In 1961, after spending millions, the project was officially scrapped. And yes, I find that pretty tragic, because how cool would it be to have an actual flying saucer flying around in the sky? Ones that don't want to abduct us and stick probes in our bodies. Here's one of the strangest stories in early space exploration, the tale of Ivan Istochnikov and his trusty dog, Cloka. Soyuz 2 was an uncrewed mission. It was the craft that the manned Soyuz 3 mission was going to be docking with. Well, there may be more to the story. In 1993, an American journalist named Mike Arena uncovered some top secret information. He claimed that a cosmonaut by the name of Ivan Istochnikov and his dog had actually been aboard Soyuz 2 during its mission in October of 1968. According to Arena, they disappeared after being struck by a meteorite. He went on to say that the Soviet government erased all records of Istochnikov and Cloka because they couldn't handle the embarrassment of a failed mission at a time where they were in such heavy competition with the United States. Well, this entire story was later revealed to be a hoax crafted by an artist named Joan Fontcaberta as an elaborate modern art project, complete with fake mission artifacts and digitally manipulated photos. The work was so convincing that it fooled not just the public, but even some media outlets. In 1998, Mexico's Una Cornea magazine published a whole issue featuring the truth about Istochnikov, totally oblivious to the fact that they were promoting a piece of art, not history. But, hey, I mean, is this just what the Russian government wants you to think? The Boeing X-20 Dyna-Soar was an ambitious project by the United States Air Force, aiming to create a cutting-edge spaceplane capable of performing a range of military missions, everything from aerial reconnaissance to sabotaging enemy satellites. It kicked off on October 24, 1957, with high hopes and a budget of $660 million. That's about $6.5 billion today. The project fell flat on its face. Not quite tragic by the sounds of it, but ask the ones who dumped all the money into it and they'd give you a very different answer. So what went wrong? Well, first off, there's the name. Now, I kind of like the name, but it's definitely silly. You see, it's Dyna, spelled D-Y-N-A, and Soar, S-O-A-R. Dinosaur. There's also a significant lack of direction with this project. The Air Force struggled to define clear goals for the program. Was it a weapon? A reconnaissance tool? The confusion meant that every step forward seemed to lead to another roadblock. On top of that, they faced constant issues with funding. Research programs like this often face budget cuts, and Dinosaur was no exception. But the biggest problem? The launch vehicle. They couldn't settle on the right booster to get Dinosaur into orbit. Originally, they floated several options, but every time they made a decision, the chosen booster fell short. By the time they finally settled on the Titan 3C, the project was already running into delays. In January of 1963, Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara questioned whether Dinosaur was even worth pursuing, noting that the Air Force was too focused on controlled re-entry without any clear purpose for orbital missions. The program was officially canceled on December 10th of 1963. In December of 1959, a major bombshell dropped when a high-ranking Czechoslovakian communist allegedly leaked super-sensitive information about secret Soviet space missions. According to this source, a cosmonaut named Alexei Ladovsky had been launched aboard a modified R-5A rocket. He also mentioned that Ladovsky and several others, Andrei Mitikov, Sergei Shiborin, and Maria Gromova, had tragically perished during these covert flights. The claims were then picked up by an Italian news agency. But then that was it. There's never been any concrete evidence of these secret missions or the cosmonauts who died. So was this an entirely fabricated story, or were there really dark secrets being hidden by the Soviet space program? Colonel Pyotr Dolgov, Ivan Kacher, and Alexei Grachov were part of a risky program testing high-altitude parachuting, which was crucial for spaceflight preparation. On November 1st, 1962, Dolgov attempted a jump from a Volga balloon gondola at an altitude of 28,640 meters, about 93,960 feet. Unfortunately, as he exited the gondola, the visor of his spacesuit collided with the structure, causing a depressurization that led to his death almost instantly. Kacher's fate is still unknown, as he disappeared around the same time, and his name has since been connected to the equipment used in these tests. Grachov was also involved in the high-altitude testing alongside Dolgov and Kacher. In late 1959, a Russian magazine featured a man named Gennady Zavodsky, another test subject who later appeared on lists of deceased cosmonauts, but with no details about his death. Vladimir Ilyushin was born on March 31st, 1927, into an aviation family. Ilyushin grew up to be a test pilot, which really has to be one of the bravest career paths out there, right? No one ever mentions that, a test pilot. Freaky. In early April of 1961, just days before Yuri Gagarin's historic spaceflight, the Soviet Union announced that Ilyushin had been involved in a serious car accident. But rumors started to spread that there was more to this story, that he'd actually died in a failed orbital flight. Reports from various sources, including the Western communist newspaper Daily Worker, claimed that Ilyushin had indeed attempted a mission that went horribly wrong. French broadcaster Edouard Bardovsky stated that Ilyushin had launched in March and slipped into a coma after the flight, but NORAD tracking stations reported that there was just no evidence of any launch. But things kept getting fishier. Later that year, US News even suggested that Gagarin's flight was a ruse and that he was actually a stand-in for the ailing Ilyushin. This conspiracy is so big that it even spawned a couple of movies. The 1999 film, The Cosmonaut Cover-Up, claimed that Ilyushin had indeed been the first man in space, stating that he was launched in a capsule named Rossiya. In the movie, after experiencing a guidance malfunction, Ilyushin was forced into an unguided crash landing in China. So I've talked about a few Cold War Russian space program cover-up conspiracies, but is there any physical proof of shady stuff going on? Well, there are possible audio recordings. The Giudica Gordelia brothers were two Italian amateur radio operators who became famous in the 60s for releasing what they said were recorded secret communications from Soviet space missions. Starting in May of 1960, the brothers claimed to have intercepted signals from a series of Soviet missions that ended tragically. One of the creepiest is the supposed recording of a cosmonaut suffocating in space. Just before Yuri Gagarin's historic flight in April of 1961, the brothers claimed they tracked a capsule that orbited Earth 3 times before crashing back down. The recordings continued with distress signals from an orbiting capsule in May of 1961, and they reported a Soviet spacecraft that veered off course and disappeared in October of 1961. In November of 1962, they noted a capsule that had bounced off the atmosphere during re-entry and vanished. The brothers also alleged that a female cosmonaut died during re-entry in May of 1963, followed by another loss in April of 1964 when a capsule burned up on re-entry. Now, as for the validity of these recordings, they're highly controversial, but a lot of them are pretty haunting either way. On October 31st of 2014, Michael Ellsbury, an American test pilot, tragically lost his life during a test flight of the VSS Enterprise, a suborbital space plane. They were trying out a new hybrid rocket engine that used nylon fuel instead of rubber. The Enterprise was released from its carrier plane, VMS Eve, and just 11 seconds after firing the rocket, the spacecraft broke apart in a massive explosion, scattering debris across a 35-mile stretch of the Mojave Desert. Witnesses saw a parachute, but sadly Ellsbury didn't survive. His co-pilot Peter Seibold managed to escape, but he was seriously injured and was rushed to the hospital. His escape was remarkable, though. He managed to unbuckle his seat and parachute to safety just in time as the wreckage fell around him. At first, people thought the new rocket engine might be to blame, but investigators quickly ruled that out when they found the engine and propellant tanks were still intact. What really went wrong was the feathering system, which helps slow the spacecraft down. It deployed too early while the rocket was still firing, leading to this catastrophic breakup. Deviating from the depressing side of things for a moment, let's talk about something called Solar Warden. Solar Warden is said to be a secret space fleet that patrols space, protecting Earth from all sorts of intergalactic threats. So while Solar Warden itself may not be a tragic accident, there's no doubt that if a military force battling aliens in space really does exist, which I hope it does, they've definitely had some casualties. Now, supposedly the United States operates a fleet consisting of 8 massive motherships, each about the size of an aircraft carrier, along with 43 smaller scout ships. These crafts are rumored to be advanced enough to travel throughout the entire solar system, not just orbiting Earth. Solar Warden allegedly came into existence thanks to advanced alien technology, which the US government acquired through secret deals with extraterrestrials. Info on Solar Warden came from a Scottish hacker named Gary McKinnon. Between February of 2001 and March of 2002, he hacked into nearly 100 military and NASA computers, claiming that he stumbled on all these images of UFOs and said that there was this Solar Warden program. This incident is often dubbed the biggest military computer hack of all time. Michael J. Adams was a brave astronaut known for flying the experimental X-15 rocket plane. A total of 12 pilots had flown this plane, including Neil Armstrong. But Adams' last flight took place on November 15th of 1967. He reached a jaw-dropping altitude of 266,000 feet. He'd broken a new record, but things took a turn for the worst on his descent. The nose of the X-15 veered off course by 15 degrees, sending the aircraft into a dangerous spin. And just 10 minutes after launching, Adams reported that he was in a spin. Tragically, the X-15 broke apart shortly after, killing him. Let's get right into it. And we're starting off the list with something pretty exciting. Possible alien megastructures on Tabby's star. So Tabby's star, scientifically known as KIC 846285, which I think is a much catchier title. Tabby's star, just a bit of a mouthful. But it's become pretty popular in recent years. Astronomers have spotted unusual and irregular dimming patterns on the star. The star's brightness dims unpredictably, and at times way more than what's expected for your typical star. So because of the strangeness that seems to be going on with this star, it's led some to speculate that there could be alien megastructures on it. And yes, even scientists are saying it's a possibility. I know it sounds wild, but the idea is that advanced extraterrestrial civilizations might be constructing massive structures like Dyson spheres or swarms around the star. And the purpose of these hypothetical megastructures could be to intentionally block or harvest the star's light to be used as energy. This would cause the dimming effect that we see. Now, this is just one speculative hypothesis. There are others, but it's pretty cool to think that this may be a genuine sign of life out there in space. Next, let's talk about fast radio bursts. So fast radio bursts, or FRBs, are powerful, fleeting signals from deep space that last just a fraction of a second, up to 3 seconds at the most. Scientists use radio telescopes to detect these bursts, but they're still not exactly sure what causes them. One theory is that FRBs could be born from cataclysmic events like collisions between neutron stars and black holes, creating ripples in space-time that generate these intense signals. And there is also the possibility that they come from advanced extraterrestrial civilizations. What makes FRBs so strange, though, is the amount of energy that they send out. In just a millisecond, these bursts release as much energy as our sun emits in 3 entire days. And what's frustrating, though, is that they appear so sporadically, it's really tough to sit down and study them. So while there are possibilities as to what could be causing these signals, they're still pretty much a complete mystery. The Great Attractor. Now, that sounds like some cosmic horror right there, and it kinda is. The Great Attractor is a massive gravitational area of the universe that's pulling our Milky Way galaxy and numerous other galaxies toward it. And yeah, that's kind of scary. The Great Attractor was first identified in the 70s when scientists noticed that our Milky Way, along with other galaxies around us, weren't moving in the direction that gravitational forces alone could explain. Something massive and hidden seemed to be tugging at everything. Now, we can't directly see the Great Attractor, so astronomers have to rely on indirect observations and measurements to understand its existence. It's this unseen force of nature, very Lovecrafty. It's thought to be a concentration of both visible and dark matter, which is the invisible substance that makes up a large part of the universe. More on that later. So what happens though when we eventually get pulled into whatever this thing is? Luckily we'll be long dead, so no point really worrying about it. But a great cosmic force like this, it really does remind us how small and insignificant we are in the grand scheme of things. Next up we have space orcs. Yes, astronomers have spotted orcs in space. Orc standing for odd radio circles. Not quite as exciting as spotting green goblin monsters in space, but also less alarming. Like, would we really be able to lay our heads down at night and sleep comfortably knowing there were orcs? I don't think so. So odd radio circles. These circles are strange astronomical objects, and scientists aren't entirely sure what causes them. Scientists have spotted them by scanning the sky using radio telescopes. They're basically circular formations and don't match any known astronomical objects or phenomena. They're not galaxies, they're not stars or supernova, they're a total mystery, and because of this, they have the nickname WTF. Now, some scientists think they could be shockwaves from cosmic events, like an explosion or a collision that creates ripples that we detect as circles, but they could also come from unknown objects or phenomena we just haven't discovered yet, which is pretty cool. We got a very large space rock coming our way, a mega comet. Now, luckily, it's going to pass us by about 1 billion miles and won't be coming until 2031, but this thing really is massive. This thing, which was first spotted in 2021, is the biggest ever observed comet. It's 100,000 times the mass of your average comet. The comet is so big that at first astronomers categorized it as a minor planet. What's freaky about this is that there's almost definitely much larger comets whizzing around out there, and although this one luckily isn't going to make contact with us, there could be another one hurtling our way as we speak that just hasn't been spotted yet. Speaking of terrifying things hurtling towards us, let's talk about Andromeda. So Andromeda, the largest and nearest galaxy to our Milky Way, just happens to be on a collision course for it. One day it will collide with the Milky Way, and when the Milky Way and the Andromeda galaxies finally collide, it won't be a sudden smash. The process takes a very long time because of the vast distances between the stars, and stars are so far apart anyway that it's unlikely they'll collide individually. But the night sky will change, constellations will shift, the appearance of the night sky will be very different in the distant future. But this collision won't be happening until billions of years from now, so there's no need to really worry about it affecting life on Earth or even the distant descendants of humanity. Fingers crossed we'll have gotten our act together and we'll be like far off on other planets by the time this happens. Next, let's talk about supernovas. Supernovas are incredibly powerful explosions that occur when massive stars reach the end of their lives. Now, the good news is that the nearest star capable of going supernova is still quite a distance away from us. We're talking many light years, but what if a supernova was so powerful that even if it was super far away, it could still affect us? What damage could it cause? Well, it could potentially affect Earth's atmosphere. The explosion releases an enormous amount of energy, including intense radiation, and this radiation, in theory, could interact with Earth's atmosphere, leading to the breakdown of the ozone layer. The ozone layer is crucial for life on Earth because it absorbs the majority of the sun's harmful UV radiation. So, in this situation, we'd be in pretty big trouble. We'd basically burn up like in Terminator 2. Next up, we have the mystery as to what dark matter and dark energy consists of. Now, we know there's a lot of stuff in a galaxy, stars, planets, and gas, but when scientists calculate all the visible matter, it's not enough. The galaxies are spinning faster than they should be based on what we can see. Something extra is needed to explain this, and that something is called dark matter. Dark matter doesn't emit, absorb, or reflect light, which is why we can't directly see it. It's the invisible scaffolding that's holding the visible parts of the galaxy together. But the invisible part, dark matter and dark energy, makes up 95% of the known universe, and that's a lot of mystery, energy, and matter. What we see, not just on a day-to-day basis here on Earth, but also when we look up at the billions of stars in the sky, that's still just barely even a sliver of reality. The universe is also constantly expanding. We know it's expanding because galaxies are slowly moving away from each other, but over time this expansion continues to speed up. Something is pushing the galaxies apart faster and faster. Scientists refer to this unseen energy as dark energy. Basically, dark matter is the invisible glue holding galaxies together, and dark energy is the mysterious repellent force making the universe expand. And we don't know what it is. Next on the list, we have the Tunguska event. This was a powerful explosion that occurred on June 30th of 1908 near the Tunguska River in Siberia, Russia. It's known as one of the most mysterious events in modern history. So there was a large impact or explosion that flattened about 80 million trees over an area of about 830 square miles. The shock wave from the blast was felt thousands of kilometers away. Strangely though, there was no impact crater found at the site. This led scientists to conclude that whatever caused the event must have disintegrated in the Earth's atmosphere before reaching the ground. What most scientists think is that this was caused by the airburst of a large meteoroid or comet. The energy released by the explosion was estimated to be equivalent to 10 to 15 megatons of TNT, making it about 1,000 times more powerful than the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima. Luckily, this happened in a very remote area, so only trees were affected, but that also means there weren't many witnesses. But a handful of people did report seeing a bright bluish light in the sky, accompanied by a series of thunderous noises. But of course, there's always been this question as to whether this was caused by a space rock or something else. And finally, I couldn't make this list without discussing the WOW signal. The WOW was a strange radio signal detected by astronomer Jerry Amon in 1977 while he was studying radio waves from space. Because he couldn't make out what the hell the signal was, he just wrote WOW on the printout of the signal, thus it got that name. It was a unique and very strong radio frequency that lasted about 72 seconds and came from the direction of the constellation Sagittarius. The signal was at a frequency of 1420 megahertz, a frequency that's usually associated with hydrogen, the most abundant element in the universe. What's strange is that the signal was never detected again though. Scientists naturally figured if it was a natural phenomenon, it would repeat, but from what we know, this was just a one-time thing. So is it possible this signal could have come from maybe an alien spacecraft? Yeah, it's a possibility. The WOW signal is still known as the strongest candidate for extraterrestrial radio transmission ever detected. And with all that said, I've been your host James, and I will catch you, yes you specifically, in the next video.
Want to see more videos like this one? Check out this video next. It's about mysterious alien evidence that needs to be investigated. These videos need to be seen to be believed. Click the video now to watch this video.
What are you waiting for? Click the video now.